One single pound sterling. If you had that tiny coin in your pocket in February of 1995, you had exactly enough capital to purchase the most prestigious financial institution in the history of the British Empire. You could have bought an entity that had survived the collapse of empires, to world wars, and multiple global economic depressions. An institution that actively helped finance the United States government during the War of 1812. But to buy it for that single pound, you also had to voluntarily assume its apocalyptic, bank-ending debts. Debts that weren't generated by a systemic market crash or a sovereign nation defaulting on its loans. They were generated by a 27-year-old kid from Watford, hiding an astronomical number in a secret digital drawer while casually wearing a green Adidas sweater. Welcome to Spotlight Lost. Today, we aren't dissecting an internet micro-celebrity who tweeted their career into oblivion or a Silicon Valley tech founder who lied about a piece of vaporware. We are looking at a much more dangerous, much more systemic kind of disaster. We are examining a man who was handed the absolute keys to the financial kingdom and a bank that simply forgot to look down as he walked them collectively off a cliff. His name is Nicholas William Leeson. Born in 1967, Leeson wasn't bred in the elite, ivy-covered boarding schools of the British aristocracy. He was a working-class kid. He was a plasterer's son from Watford, England, completely lacking the silver spoon that usually accompanied high finance in the city of London. But what he lacked in aristocratic pedigree and university degrees, he made up for with an absolute, ravenous hunger to prove he was the smartest guy in the room. He clawed his way up through sheer nerve, and for a brief, terrifying window of time, he actually was. To truly comprehend the absolute insanity of this collapse, you have to understand the sheer weight and momentum of the monolith that was Barings Bank, founded in 1762 by Sir Francis Baring. This wasn't just a bank. It was the financial backbone of modern history. They didn't just hold money, they shaped global geopolitics. They helped finance the Napoleonic Wars, and they were instrumental in facilitating the United States' purchase of Louisiana from France. When the Queen of England needed a secure place to put her personal wealth, she implicitly trusted Barings. They weren't entirely invincible. In the late 1880s, the firm actually faced a severe existential crisis due to massive overexposure to Argentine and Uruguayan debt, requiring a bailout from the Bank of England. But they survived. They always survived. By the early 1990s, Barings was viewed as untouchable. And into this blue-blooded, 2-100-30-3-year-old institution walked young Nick Leeson. Leeson originally made a name for himself cleaning up a massive administrative mess in the Barings Jakarta office when he was barely 22 years old. He was a prodigy of operational efficiency. While the old guard in London was sipping expensive scotch and relying on centuries of historical momentum, Leeson was in the sweltering trenches, figuring out the intricate plumbing of the emerging Asian markets. He was devastatingly good at it. He pulled in £100 million for the bank, a number so utterly staggering that it completely blinded his superiors to any potential red flags. London absolutely loved him. They called him their star, treating him like an infallible golden goose. Because of this massive, undeniable success, Barings decided to reward him with unprecedented authority. They promoted him to head their newly minted trading operations in Singapore, putting him in charge of a 20-man unit on the Simex exchange. He was only 25 years old at the time. And this exact promotion is where Barings made the single most fatal administrative error in the entire history of modern corporate finance. They let Nick Leeson operate as both the head of the trading desk and the head of the back office. Let that structural failure sink in for a moment. In any legitimate, functioning financial institution, those two roles are strictly separated by an impenetrable wall of steel. The trader takes the risks, makes the baits, and generates the revenue. The back office settles the trades, checks the math, audits the accounts, and catches the mistakes. It is a mandatory, Ironclad separation of powers. You never ever let the person spinning the roulette will also serve as the casino manager who counts the chips and audits the vault. But Barings did because Leeson was a star. By 1993, he was reportedly responsible for 10% of the bank's entire global profit. And in high finance, stars simply do not get questioned. Here is the exact, step-by-step anatomy of how a financial titan actually dies. It doesn't start with a multi-billion-dollar explosion. It starts with a tiny, quiet whisper. A whisper that no one wants to hear. Step 1, the spark. It started quietly on July 3rd, 1992. A junior, relatively inexperienced member of Leeson's trading team made a routine execution error. It was a minor mistake that cost the bank roughly £20,000. For a bank with the immense capitalization of Barings, £20,000 is literally a rounding error. It is absolute pocket change. Leeson could have reported it to London, taken a minor administrative reprimand, absorbed the loss, and moved on with his skyrocketing career. Step 2, the hiding place. He didn't report it. Instead, Leeson purposefully opened a secret error account for BFS, Barings Futures Singapore. He numbered this covert account 88,888. 5 eighths. He claimed internally that it was opened to correct an error made by an inexperienced team member, but in reality, it rapidly became his personal digital dumping ground. Why did he choose that specific number? Because in Chinese numerology, the number 8 is considered incredibly lucky. It was a hidden digital drawer where mistakes could be quietly tucked away, just temporarily, just until he could trade his way back to even. Step 3, the trap of the human mind. The psychology of loss aversion is one of the most destructive psychological forces on Earth. Human beings do not feel a gain and a loss equally. Losing hurts roughly twice as much as winning feels good. We will do almost anything, cross almost any line, to avoid permanently admitting a loss. Instead of closing the gap, the financial hole inside the supposedly lucky 88,000 account rapidly grew. 20,000 became to million became 50 million. To cover these exponentially growing losses, Leeson had to make increasingly massive, speculative bets on the Asian futures markets. He was primarily betting that the Japanese stock index, the Nikkei, would remain perfectly stable. By the end of 1994, he was actively hiding a colossal loss of over £200 million. He was completely unraveling. He was aggressively forging documents, faking a counterparty, and inventing a completely fictional client to casually explain to London where all this immense funding was going. He was sweating through his shirts, throwing up in the office bathroom from the crushing anxiety, while London just kept blindly wiring him more cash. They thought they were funding their superstar trader. In reality, they were filling their own grave. Step 4, the act of God. On January 17, 1995, the earth literally split open. A devastating, massive earthquake struck Kobe, Japan. The natural disaster sent immediate, terrifying shockwaves through the Japanese economy, and the Nikkei plummeted. Leeson's massive, highly leveraged bets, which absolutely relied on the market staying stable, were instantly and totally annihilated. This was the final possible moment to pull the ripcord. Any sane person stops here, calls London, and confesses everything. Instead, NickLeeson did the unthinkable. He doubled down. He began aggressively buying Nikkei futures by the absolute thousands, frantically attempting to single-handedly push an entire national stock market back up by sheer force of will. It was one single man fighting against an earthquake, against a sovereign nation's economy, and against the fundamental laws of mathematics. He lost every single point the index dropped. He lost millions more. The losses violently exploded from 200 million to 500 million and finally settled at an unfathomable 827 million pounds. Or, measured another way, the The fraudulent and speculative trades resulted in a fatal loss of 1.4 billion US dollars. This devastating figure was twice Barings' entirely available trading capital, which sat around 350 million pounds. Leeson hadn't just lost money, he had lost significantly more money than the centuries-old bank actually possessed. On February 23, 1995, sitting paralyzed at his desk in Singapore, NickLeeson knew the game was finally over. He scribbled the pathetic words on a piece of paper. "I'm sorry." He left the handwritten note on his desk, grabbed his wife, and immediately ran. He fled to a hotel in Malaysia and temporarily disappeared, instantly triggering a massive international manhunt. Back in London, the weekend was defined by a horrifying, dead silence. Executives finally bypassed his firewalls and opened the 88,888 account. I've heard accounts of people near that room. A 2-100-30-3-year-old institution full of brilliant, highly educated financial men stood around a glowing computer screen, utterly speechless. There were no words. The math was agonizingly simple. Barings was already dead. It just hadn't been formally buried yet. On Sunday, February 26, 1995, Barings Bank was officially declared completely insolvent. It was sold days later to the Dutch bank and insurance company, In Group, for the utterly humiliating sum of exactly £1, within assuming all of Barings' catastrophic liabilities. The global reaction was a potent mixture of outrage and sheer, unadulterated disbelief. How could one rogue trader single-handedly bring down the Queen's Bank? When Leeson was finally apprehended attempting to travel through Frankfurt and subsequently extradited back to Asia, the resulting imagery became permanently burned into financial history. He looked significantly less like a sophisticated criminal mastermind and far more like a university student caught skipping a crucial exam. He was paraded through the Singapore airport wearing a casual green Adidas sweatshirt, utterly surrounded by heavily armed police officers. He faced swift and brutal justice. He was found legally guilty of 2 explicit counts, deceiving the bank's auditors and cheating the Singapore exchange. In December of 1995, Leeson was sentenced to a harsh 6.5 years of imprisonment in Singapore's notoriously difficult penal system. Behind bars, his life continued to disintegrate. He lost his marriage, and he nearly lost his life when he was diagnosed with colon cancer. Ultimately, the man who brought down Britain's oldest merchant bank was granted an early release due to his severe health issues. He was officially released on July 3, 1999, nearly 3 years before the actual completion of his sentence. He would later ironically become the CEO of the Irish football club Galway United, but his name would forever be synonymous with the terrifying phrase rogue trader. There is a profoundly haunting reality resting at the core of this entire collapse. The initial £20,000 mistake was absolutely nothing. Barings could have paid that off in a fraction of a second without a single executive even flinching. The bank was not killed by the financial loss itself. It was killed by the frantic, obsessive hiding of the loss. We often assume that catastrophic failures always require catastrophic, unpredictable events. But the truth is far more mundane and far more terrifying. This wasn't a complex market failure, it was a deeply human one. It was the unyielding arrogance of an ancient institution blindly believing it was totally immune to the rules, perfectly matched with the crippling, irrational fear of a young man who couldn't bear the sting of failure. They built a financial empire that lasted over 2 centuries, only to watch it instantly burn down because nobody wanted to admit they had carelessly dropped a match. And it serves as the ultimate, chilling proof that no matter how deep your roots are, no matter how prestigious your name sounds, or how untouchable you truly believe you are, gravity always wins because in the end, every star falls.